Hi, everybody. This is Gerald Worley's from the Natural Health Improvement Center. And today I have an amazing person. Her name is Millie Byra or Barra, depending on if you're on the West Coast or East Coast. And so I today want to learn from her and share with her gifts and her tools to anybody who's listening and anybody who's an existing patient, because her services can actually complement what we offer in our clinic with the functional nutrition, herbs, and the anti-parasitic cleanses. And today she's going to talk a lot about body code, emotion code, and her story, what got her into it. So, Millie, can you just, welcome to this recording and this interview. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gerald, for having me on here. Hi, everybody. I'm Millie, like he said. Yeah, depending on the East Coast, West Coast, it's pronounced differently. But basically, I am a mom of two boys. And 6 years ago, I pretty much found myself rock bottom of struggling with a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of physical pain, to the point where I went to my then doctor and said, there's something wrong with me. And I was just really desperate to figure out what was going on. And of course, like I'm sure many of you can resonate with this story as well. Pretty much they said, oh, everything looks great. You're just fine. And I said, no, there's not something fine with me. Like, and I full on broke down in the doctor's office, and he's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. So I went and saw another doctor. But the difference with this next doctor is he mentions to me something called the emotion code. And it perked up my interest to the point where I ran home and I YouTubed it, and I came across Dr. Bradley Nielsen. And it pretty much changed the entire trajectory of my life and my family's life, because I was able to discover a holistic modality to be able to help my emotional body, my physical body, and just for better overall well-being and health. So, I'll oftentimes we get into this work because of our own journey. And that's exactly what happened is, so I did the inner work. I used the modality of the emotion code and body code, which I'll go into more detail exactly like what that all consists of. And then it was really just prompted on my heart to become a practitioner, because I really wanted to help people realize that they didn't have to keep suffering in life, that they really could find something that would help them thrive. And oftentimes that begins by getting to the root cause. And as Gerald does a beautiful job of being able to identify on like the physical aspects of what you need to do for your nutrition and parasites and toxins and all those different things, there's another really big component, and that's the emotional body. Because according to Dr. Bradley Nielsen, who is the creator of the emotion code and body code, his theory is that emotions are energy in motion. And this has actually been a scientifically proven method. And basically, what happens is when we do not process out our emotions, or we encounter trauma, whether it's what we refer to as big trauma, right? The big T, or little trauma, and our body doesn't process it, it keeps a score, right? It holds on to that cell memory, and that energy gets stored into our body, and it creates dis-ease. And there's a hyphen in the middle of that. And that's when then it begins to manifest as physical ailments, sleeping issues, depression, anxiety, phobias, like all those different things. And so really the emotion code and body code is a very quick and effective way to be able to identify these energies and then to be able to release them. And it's just been such a blessing for me and then for my clients. So after doing the work myself for about a year, I then went on in 2019 to go get certified as first a level 1 emotion code practitioner, and then went on to the body code. So
That's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of individuals, and even myself included, growing up, you're a parent, I'm a parent, and our job as parents are to do our best to make sure our children don't experience trauma, whether that's by our doing, unfortunately, can be accidental, unintentional, or even out in the real world. And sometimes we have life experiences unexpectedly. Sometimes we have turn of events, and we all go through some sort of emotional trauma. And I love how you highlight that somehow the body will store it. It will keep score. And that can then also lead to some sort of stagnation within the energy that's flowing within our body, because we need to now learn how to release that. But it's challenging. I think it can be challenging for an individual to learn how to do that. And I remember while being young and learning stories and tells of got to learn to forgive, got to learn to forgive. But sometimes forgiving is a very hard thing to do because that means you have to release something, and it's not always easy to release. And I would assume that's how the work that you help with people, it allows people to let go of these things that they're holding on to. And in some situations, allow them to finally forgive. Maybe even forgiving not another person that inflicted the trauma or the harm, but maybe sometimes even forgiving themselves or wherever that may be directed. So what does the process look like for you when you work with somebody? Because there's going to be a lot of individuals who are watching this, a lot of my patients who I'm going to recommend, who I know are holding on to emotions, some stored emotional trauma, and I can see it within them that they're having challenges letting go. What does it look like when someone starts to work with you? I'm sure you have an assessment process, and then you have an order in which you want to help them to start releasing certain issues. And obviously, you're going to figure out exactly what stored traumas or what stored emotions that they're still holding on to. So can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, like there's an initial intake form that you automatically are receiving when you schedule an appointment with me. I do an initial evaluation for clients just to make sure I can get kind of a big picture of what's going on. The beautiful thing about the emotion code and the body code is we use kinesiology. So I do all of my sessions via proxy, which means they're virtual. That's the beautiful thing about energy work. Just like I'm able to talk to you here on Zoom and we're not connected with wires or anything. That's exactly what energy is it's just waves and things throughout the atmosphere. And so I do all of my sessions virtually in my office here, and I act as your proxy, and I use muscle testing to be able to identify what your body is able to release. And oftentimes this is around whatever types of concerns that you're coming to me, or based on the evaluation, kind of some themes that I may be seeing saying, oh, we may be really working on things that may be associated to an event in your life, or maybe it's associated to physical pain that you're coming to. Like for me, that was the most powerful thing when my very first session, I had chronic shoulder pain, and in my first session, had my practitioner identify that I had a trapped emotion of shock from when I was 7 years old. And I can even remember this memory. I was sitting in a conference with my mom. I was 7 years old, sitting across from this teacher saying that I was lazy, I was unmotivated, I wasn't going to amount to anything. And even at the age of 7, while I didn't necessarily understand what was going on around me, my body was shocked by what I was hearing and by the impact those words had on me, because our words also hold a vibration and can have a direct effect on us. And I could literally feel, as the practitioner was clearing, we use a magnet. So across our main meridian, we swipe a magnet across to be able to release the energy around that emotion. And I could feel my shoulder tingling. And by the end of the session, the pain was gone. And to this day, I have not had that same pain in that shoulder. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I have some clients right away have a huge shift and a huge impact within their sessions. Other clients, it takes repetitive sessions. It just really depends on how quickly your body is willing or able to be able to release. And you can think about this work as pulling back layers of an onion. And that's really what it is. We have these trapped emotions or these energies that layer up and just stack upon them. And we absorb these energies as well. So these are inherited energies. And when I say energies, emotions or energetic blocks, but they can be inherited, they can be absorbed, they can be shared. So a shared one would be like, for example, if you go to a funeral, everyone in the room is grieving. So if you're not processing out that grief, you're going to hold on to that shared trapped emotion of grief. And there's even preconception ones where you actually in utero will absorb emotions that your mother or your father are feeling while you're in gestation and growing as well. So it's really fascinating to see that when you begin to offload these things, how you begin to just feel like that's the number one thing. The majority of my clients are like, I just feel lighter. Like, I just feel happier. I feel like things don't bother me as much. I'm less triggered. I'm less reactive. I'm sleeping better. My physical pain's better. And it's really all of that inner work that oftentimes we don't realize we're walking around with so much. I like to call it emotional baggage, right? Like all the links
Right.
that we're kind of carrying around. And I always think of like the movie, The Christmas Carol, the Scrooge and the Ghost of the Christmas Past has all those links carrying along. And we just go link by link and we start to be able to release those things. And so really, most of my clients who work with me with me for a series, usually around about 6 sessions, depending on what the goal is. And from there, then we decide, what do you want your aftercare? Some come back every once in a while, some come back continually for longer periods of time. And it just really depends on what your goals are. But
Yeah.
that's kind of what you can expect.
Okay, that's great. And I love that analogy, because the emotional baggage, and it's a term that we always throw out that, long ago when we were single, we'd be dating individuals and we're like, oh, that one's got too much baggage, this person got too much of that. And we ourselves have our own baggage. We ourselves have whatever emotional trauma stored in our physical bodies. And I love that analogy of the chain links, and we're just dragging this ball and chain, and if we can somehow cut them away, clearing each layer, it's naturally we're going to feel lighter. Naturally, we're going to feel happier. Naturally, we're going to feel unfettered or feel more capable to live the life that we're meant to live. And this is so important to every parent out there, or any individual, right? Because we're probably holding ourselves back from a better career, from being a better manager, a better employee, a better father, a better husband, wife, mother. And then what about children? Can you tell me a little bit too? Because I know as a parent, I've been able to experience such great emotional healing to, in some situations, undo the emotional trauma that I experienced from my parents, because I understood that my parents were doing the best with what they had to deal with. There were 2 immigrant parents coming from third world countries, really struggling to make ends meet. And then they had limited time to help us, but they were the best parents they could be when I was growing up. Of course, there's trauma from there. There's trauma from being in society that when they weren't around, we were left to ourselves to just interface with strangers and the general public. And I've been able to go through my emotional healing journey. I wish Body Code and Motion Code was around when I was younger, because I'm sure I could have benefited. And but now these solutions are here. And now, of course, I think about my kids, but I also think of other kids out there. And I think about all the parents that I'm helping in the clinic, and they bring their children in, and I can kind of see the family dynamics, and I'm doing my best, but I don't implement Motion Code, Body Code. That's where I send them to you and get that help. But tell me a little bit about your experience in working with children, and, and what is that like? And obviously, ideally, do you prefer that parents are first receiving some of your services first to experience that benefit, and then they work with the kids, or do you work with kids directly?
So basically, the beautiful thing is we can help kids in 2 ways. One, by the parents coming and working with me, because just like you said, there's generational healing that is taking place by being able to identify and release those inherited emotions or traumas. There's even in the body code, we identify things such as miasm, which is inherited sickness memory, and you may notice where it's like, why does a family always have the same ailments that they're constantly? Well, that's because all of these things have an energetic imprint, just like parasites and all these things, even though you release them, sometimes they leave an energetic imprint, and that's where the emotion code and body code comes in to be able to release that. But so you can work within yourself, and I always encourage like parents, if they're interested, try a session for yourself, just so you know what to kind of expect and what it's all about. But when you're doing this work on yourself, it creates a ripple effect, and it does by releasing those inherited energetic blocks or misalignments or trapped emotions. The other thing too is you yourself as a parent are showing up better with a little bit more emotional intelligence. You're not as triggered, you're not as reactive. So you're actually going to create an atmosphere within you. I work with a lot of moms. That has been part of my passion and my mission, is helping moms be able to show up better in motherhood and be able to serve the ones they love the most without being so reactive. So that's the first part. But I do 100% work with kids. So my actual original background prior to becoming an energy worker was teaching elementary school. So I have a master's in elementary education, and I've had a passion for kids. But the thing is how we approach it, because obviously kids don't really understand. Like if you're like, let's get you on a Zoom call or let's do a phone call, session, they're going to be like, not understanding what's going on. So typically the way I do children's, usually to the age of 13, 14, it really depends on the parent and the child, whether or not they want to be present once they're at an age where they can understand. Like I worked with one child that was about 11 years old, and she enjoyed actually being on the calls. She was a little bit more mature for her age, and she wanted to interact with it as well, which was totally fine. But those are typically done either with the parent present. And then of course, since I'm acting as proxy, I'm able, with permission of the parent, to be able to connect energetically and ask their body where it wants to release those different things based on the concerns that I've discussed with the parents. Or they're done as email sessions. And pretty much an email session can be done on anyone. That's great for the busy person who just doesn't have the time to be able to schedule. We do some talking either over the phone or via email and identify the areas of concern. And then I'm able to do the clearing with that. So, I personally obviously do the work on my children, and I've seen a huge, huge transformation. My youngest in particular, he had a lot of phobias around like bathing and getting in a pool, getting his hair wet, all those different things, to the point where we couldn't get his hair cut for the first like 4 years of his life, because he would just kick and scream. And it was just this huge traumatic thing. And I did 2 sessions on him. So they were about a week's apart from each other. And he went from a child where we had to wrap him up in a towel just to buzz his head like every 6 months, to going over to his grandmother's house, getting into the pool, and then saying, hey, I want to wear goggles. Can I go underwater? To that same day, then he said, my hair's in my face. I need it cut. Like he was asking for it to get cut. And we took him straight to the hairdresser that day, and he sat there perfectly fine without crying and got his hair cut.
That's great.
And I was like, who is this child? Because there was something around it. And actually in the session, I discovered it was coming down to a control issue where he felt like he was out of control. And there was some insecurities there as well. And so we were able to release that, because that's what happened, is when your body starts having that visceral response, like if you have fear of flying or whatever, and you start having that visceral response, because the subconscious mind can't tell the difference between the past and the present, it connects to everything before it that has given you the same response in your body.
Yeah.
And so you start having that same reaction, and it brings up all of those emotions, and it sends out that vibration within your system into that like panic mode of, this has got to stop.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Oh, that's great. It's and it's not necessarily you have to find out where this came from, but more that, okay, if this exists, then we're going to just go ahead and clear it, because
exactly.
some people may be like, well, where did this come from? And it's like, well, it's hard to know. We can dig deep, but that might take some time, but let's just go ahead and clear it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about this is, I'm a huge advocate of whatever therapies or modalities you find beneficial for yourself. I have a lot of clients who have tried traditional talk therapy and have been in therapy for a long time, and they're like, I just feel like I can't move past it. And they've come to me and then done 1 or 2 sessions, and it's like,
yeah,
I can finally move past this. Yeah. And that's because of the energetic imprint that it's leaving within your system. So no matter how much talking out it, all that's doing is re-triggering that energy within your
driving
system.
it in.
Exactly. Versus identifying it, let's clear it and let's move forward. Yeah. So
that's great. Yeah. I have, you're talking about, your son and, or, having a child who doesn't want to get their hair cut. I'm like, does it work for kids and chores? So if I've got kids, sometimes they're a little bit lagging on chores. Could we clear the barrier that's preventing them from?
Science with kids who are very ornery or disrespectful, and a lot of times that the reason why they're having that response is it's rooted in something else,
Mm,
and a lot of times there may be anger issues. Anger is just the surface level emotion that creates kind of a bit of a release within your system, and it's oftentimes rooted in something deeper, which is usually fear. And so, yeah, 100%. It just, I've done it with my kids where to be able to get along better, where they just start butting heads. And I'm like, okay, like you guys I do actually a group clearing for them. And I'm like, okay, like let's release some of this sibling, negative energy around you guys. And then sure enough, they are better the next day.
that's awesome. That's awesome. And you mentioned about the magnet along the meridian, and some of our audience viewers don't understand what meridians are. Are you referring to what the meridians are in Chinese medicine, or?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So our meridians, if you've done acupuncture or any type of, Chinese medicine, it refers to the meridians that are running throughout our entire body. And our meridians are our energy flow systems. Um, and what I do is we run it along the main meridian. So the governing meridian of your body, which connects to everything. And for me doing proxy, I start at my forehead and I move back. Now, if we were in person, it would be going down from the back of your head all the way down your spine, and then just swiping it with a magnet. So an analogy would be if you have a credit card, right? It stores all your information on that credit card. It's be able to connect and communicate with the machine just with a swipe. Well, if you were to take that credit card and take a magnet and start swiping over it, right? We all know,
Yeah.
don't get your credit cards near a magnet, right? It
Right.
completely clears everything out.
Mm.
And that's exactly what we do in the emotion code and body code by using a magnet. Is we are basically neutralizing the energetic charge of that identified energetic misalignment.
Perfect. We probably need some big magnets for the world, because there's a lot of emotional releasing and clearing that's needing to be done.
Yeah, well,
So,
and that's the biggest thing. I always tell people, like, you don't know what you don't know. So don't beat yourself up too much, because we don't want to add any additional emotional trauma around this.
right.
Right. But basically, I feel like we are in an age where many of us are now kind of remembering that there's another way of being able to approach well-being, mind, body, and spirit. And, we have been in a society where it's suck it up, don't cry, all these different programmings and beliefs of like, you got to stuff it in, you just got to keep pushing forward. And so we've kind of grown up where there's been kind of a lack of emotional awareness and intelligence. And so now, especially, I feel like in my generation, I'm 41, but like in this generation, there's a big, huge movement now around like, let's do the generational healing. Let's get to the root of the trauma. Let's release like all these things, because we're all recognizing the impact it has had on our total well-being,
Yeah.
and the effect that it has. And there needs to be that shift.
Yeah.
So,
Now it's great. Now, one last question. Identifying and then helping individuals release whatever stored traumas and emotions that are being locked in is important. But naturally, we're going to have life experiences. When I was younger, I lost my mother when I was at the age of 17, and no one prepared me emotionally for what was to come. And a lot of that, those type of events can still happen at any point in time to anybody's life. Are there resources that you also provide your clients in terms of how to further in the future to process what they're dealing with emotionally, so that they don't get it stuck and it doesn't become this subconscious driving it into the physical, the visceral side of our body, leading to some physical symptoms? Is that part of also your services that you're helping, so that people can understand how to process these things further so they don't get further negatively impacted?
yes, exactly. So in addition to being certified as an emotion code and body code practitioner, I'm also certified as an emotional freedom technique, which is tapping. And so I do work with a lot of my clients on teaching them how to use tapping, because tapping is a way to be able to naturally release emotions on your own, or stress or overwhelm or anything that you might be feeling like in the moment. I also, in my calls with my clients, oftentimes there is a bit of that coaching, right? To discuss the situations. I'm in the process of also building out additional resources of exactly like, how do I process the emotions and things like that. And really, like Dr. Bradley talks about it, he's like, pretty much you can guarantee like there is at least one trapped emotion for every day you've been alive, so don't always, people, when I do their first session, they're always like, oh my gosh, like that was a lot. Is that a lot? Like, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, no, 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 like it's pretty average. Most people release anywhere between, 6 to 12 just trapped emotions. That's not including what we get into, any type of thought patterns or beliefs, or like there's a whole other realm in the body code about that. But so it's pretty normal to have that. And really, again, I think the most important thing, so anyone who's listening, is when you begin to consciously, like, even just have the awareness of like, oh, I'm having some really big feelings. I'm a true believer that there is no bad emotions. I think we've placed labels around because it creates an uncomfortable feeling in us. But really, our emotions are just our guides, right? We were created to be emotional beings and have this experience. That's what separates us from, a worm on the ground, right? So it's important to be able to feel our emotions and recognize that it's okay to have grief and sorrow, but it's what you do with it. And so the lifespan of an emotion is only 90 seconds. That's scientifically proven. For it to come into your system, you have a visceral response, and then your body processes out. So everybody's like, well, then why am I angry, at my kids the next day after they upset me, or the guy cut me off and I'm steaming when I get home? Well, that's because you've attached that whole long link of stuff, and your subconscious mind is attaching all of those events to have you start mulling over it. So my biggest suggestion is, acknowledge of this is what I'm feeling versus trying to avoid it, trying to stuff it down, trying to move past it, but just be like, I'm feeling this right now. Acknowledge it, take a deep breath, and just even say like, I'm choosing to let it go. And I encourage you to try that and see, just by doing that action, how you move throughout your day. Because we're always going to have something, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. You talked about traffic, or I'm kind of like thinking you should sit in traffic with a bumper sticker going, call me for emotion code, body code. I can help you through this, and then you definitely get someone watching that advertisement for a good 20 minutes, depending on where you are in traffic. So, yeah.
Or, you're angry at your partner for not taking out the trash, right?
Oh, yeah. 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 Or not washing the dishes. Maybe I gotta. So great. This is a lot of phenomenal information, and I appreciate you sharing this and helping others to understand what emotion code, body code is, how trapped emotions can be let go, can be released, and how that can also play into one's physical experience on a daily basis. And the fact that we all are experiencing emotions, that's a given fact. And some of us can let go of them much more easily than others. And we all, in some way, shape, or form, have been impacted a little bit longer. I can think of instances where I'm like, gosh, how come I'm ruminating on this a little bit longer than I should be? And then, that's where I'll call you up and be like, hey, yo, I need your magnet. Let's do this, And so how can people find you when they want more information, they want to schedule an initial consult with you? Where should they go?
Yeah, perfect. Well, you can find me over on my website, which is www.thrive-within.com. You can also email me at millie@milliebarra.com. I'm also over on Instagram, which is also just my name at Millie Barra. I talk a lot more over there around kind of my passion around helping moms navigate their triggers and get their joy back. But that's absolutely somewhere where you can connect with me. I work with people of all ages, and male, female, whatever. I work with everyone. So it's really just meeting you at where you're at in life and whatever your concerns or goals are. And of course, I really encourage just, start with that introductory, consultation call for you to be able to get your questions answered. I can do an evaluation with you and kind of let you know what possibly would be, good pathway for you moving forward. And it's just really for you to be able to experience it. And if you're interested, I highly recommend checking out the Emotion Code by Dr. Bradley Nielsen. He also just published in, I think it was February, the Body Code. He is the founder and creator of this modality, and he also has some videos as well about what it's all about and everything. But he's a great resource if you're just interested in reading the book to get started as well.
Yeah, a lot of great resources on there, a lot of great videos. Awesome, Millie. Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. And I definitely know that you're helping so many people with your modalities. And for anybody who we are co-supporting, I handling the physical side of things and the functional nutrition. You're helping with the emotion code, body code, with the letting go of these stored, trapped emotions. Thank you again. And anybody who's looking for more information, I'm going to put a link down below so you can get directly to her website. All right. Have a good, wonderful rest of your day, and awesome job.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Take care.